The data chip was small enough to fit between two fingers. Admiral Dara Osei had been carrying it in her front pocket for 11 days, ever since the Accord's emergency signal reached Earth's outer relay, and every human defense office from Luna to the Jovian belt went very quiet, very fast. She placed it on the table now. Flat, centered, said nothing. The chamber of Pale Ring Station held 47 species. Some floated in pressurized pods. Some breathed filtered air through masks the size of human torsos. One species, the Mun, a coral-like collective from the Veth system, communicated entirely through color pulses in their translucent shells. Right now, they were pulsing a dull, fearful orange. Everyone was afraid. That was the honest summary of the summit. 47 species, hundreds of delegates, and every single one of them had come to Pale Ring Station carrying the same weight in their chest that humans called dread. The Draknari had taken another world 6 weeks ago, a quiet agricultural planet called Sen, home to the Falori, a gentle, long-lived species that had never once built a warship. The Draknari hadn't destroyed Sen. That was the part that kept other species awake at night. They had simply absorbed it, moved in, reorganized everything. The Falori were still there, working, producing, contributing to the Draknari Empire now. Counselor Ara called the session to order. She was ancient even by Accord standards, a Vethian elder with a body like stacked black stone and eyes that had watched 3 galactic generations rise and fail. Her voice, translated through the chamber's relay system, came out as a low, even tone that pressed against the ears like a held breath. "We have documented the advance," she said. "We have modeled the projections. Without intervention, the Draknari reached the inner spiral in approximately 14 of your standard years." She paused. For some species present, that is less than 1 generation. The chamber was quiet. "We are asking every member to state what they can offer. Ships, personnel, resources, anything." The offers came in order of seat position. They were honest, and they were not enough. The Tyranni offered 40 warships and a fuel depot. The Ceshari pledged 2 infantry divisions and orbital relay support. The Mun pulsed pale gold, a contribution of medical and logistical support, since they had no weapons to speak of. Species after species offered what they had, and what they had was, collectively, a wall made of paper standing in front of something that moved like stone. When it was humanity's turn, Dara did not stand immediately. She looked at the data chip on the table. Then she looked up at Ara. Then she looked slowly around the room, at the orange Mun, at the trembling Falori representatives who had survived Sin by being off-world during the absorption, at Vel, the young Luthian diplomat assigned as her liaison, whose 6 arms were folded tightly across his narrow chest like a creature bracing for cold wind. Then she stood. "Before I begin," she said, "I want to ask the council one question." Ara's mandibles moved once. "Proceed." "When you sent the emergency signal to Earth," Dara said, "what did you expect us to bring?" The question sat in the air. Several delegates shifted. Vel's arms tightened further. Ara answered carefully. "We hope for a fleet. Perhaps 2. Humanity has been a valued member of the Accord for 60 years. Your naval development has been steady and steady," Dara repeated. Not mocking, just noting the word. She picked up the data chip and walked to the chamber's central display post, a column of light that rose from the floor to the ceiling, capable of projecting documents large enough for every species in the room to read regardless of visual range or spectrum. She inserted the chip. The display activated. A loading sequence began. Not the content yet, just the file index. Just a table of contents. Just a list of lists that IT took 3 minutes and 14 seconds to fully load. The chamber watched in silence. 3 minutes was a long time in a room full of frightened people. Long enough for the Mun to shift from orange to a confused, questioning white. Long enough for Vel to unfold 2 of his arms and press them flat against the table. Long enough for a Falori delegate near the back to quietly ask her neighbor what was happening and receive no answer. When the index finally finished loading, it filled the display from floor to ceiling. Categories, subcategories, classification levels, storage locations, production notes, revision dates, GOS, the Draknari defector seated in the observer section, the one who had risked everything to warn the Accord about the Empire's next moves, leaned forward in his seat. He had been briefed on humanity. He had read their public military disclosures, their registered fleet numbers, their Accord-reported defense budgets. He had not been briefed on this. Ara stared at the index for a long moment. Then she looked at Dara. "This is your contribution?" she asked. "This," Dara said, "is the table of contents." She clasped her hands behind her back. "How much time do you have?" The first page of the actual document was not weapons. It was a warning that in plain, translated text, centered on the display above the Accord chamber. The opening line of humanity's military inventory read, "This document is classified at the highest level of the Human Defense Logistics Office. Unauthorized distribution carries a minimum sentence of 40 years. You are reading this because the situation has been deemed to meet threshold criteria. Proceed accordingly." Vel stared at that line for a moment. He had studied human culture for 9 years as part of his diplomatic training. He knew their idioms, their humor, their habit of understatement. He had always found them a pleasant, if slightly unpredictable, species that he was beginning to revise that assessment. Dara began reading. Not summarizing, reading. Category by category. She had a clear voice, unhurried, the kind of voice that made every word land with the same flat weight as the one before it. It was, in its own way, the most unsettling thing about the presentation. No drama. No pride. Just inventory. Kinetic rail battery systems, she said. Planetary surface and orbital variants. 812 active units across human-controlled space. Effective range, depending on variant, between 400,000 and 2.1 million kilometers. Rate of fire, she paused briefly. Classified. Storage locations available on request. She moved on. Atmospheric denial platforms. Originally designed to prevent aerial invasion of contested ground territory. Repurposed variants capable of engaging low-orbit craft. 3,240 units. Mostly in reserve. Last active deployment was a training exercise off Titan 11 years ago. The chamber was very still. Antimatter warhead variants. She stopped on this one, slightly longer than the others. 17 distinct classifications. Yields range from tactical, roughly equivalent to eliminating a city block, to strategic. The strategic variants are sealed. We do not discuss yields publicly. There are a lot of them. Goss made a sound. A small, involuntary sound that translated across the relay as something close to a quiet exhale of shock. He pressed his mouth closed and sat back. Dara did not look at him. She kept reading. Directed energy arrays. Autonomous combat drones. She listed them by class, from the small interceptor units the size of a human fist to the heavy platform variants the size of a Lithian shuttle. Hundreds of thousands of the former. Tens of thousands of the latter. All in storage. All maintained. All updated on a rotating schedule by automated systems that have been running quietly, without announcement, for decades. Psychological Operations Division, she read. 42 active units specializing in information disruption, signal interference, and long-range behavioral analysis of enemy command structures. Capabilities include, she glanced at the page, I'll summarize. They're very good at making the enemy confused and afraid. We'll leave it at that. A delegate from the Tyranny leaned to his neighbor and whispered something. The neighbor had no answer. Bunker penetration payloads, Dara continued. Rated for various depths and compositions. The deepest rated variant was theoretically designed to reach and disrupt a planetary core-adjacent target. We have not tested that one live. She paused. We are fairly confident it works. The Mun had gone from questioning white to a pale, flat gray. That particular color, Vel knew from his training, indicated a state of profound recalibration. It was the color Mun turned when the universe had just shown them something they needed time to process. He understood the feeling. The document's first major section ended. Dara looked up. That completes the stored legacy inventory, she said. These are weapons systems that already exist, are maintained, and are ready for deployment. Some of the oldest systems on that list were designed approximately 200 years ago. Ara, who had not moved since the reading began, finally spoke. 200 years, she said slowly. You have had weapons of this scale for 200 years. Some of them, yes. And you never used them. Not externally, no. Dara's tone did not change. We had a period internally, a long period where we came very close. Several times. But we worked through it. Goss raised his hand. It was an oddly formal gesture from a defector. Forgive me, he said. I was briefed on humanity before I came to the Accord. My briefing listed you as a moderately capable species with a small but developing military presence and no history of large-scale interstellar conflict. That's accurate, Dara said. Then where did all of this come from? Dara folded the display back to the index page. All those categories, all those subcategories, all those pages still unread. We had a lot of practice, she said. On each other. She scrolled to the next section header. It read, Naval Systems, Deep Space Engagement, Classified, Tier 1. Should I continue? She asked. No one said no. No one said anything. The room was the kind of quiet that happens when a large group of people all realize, at roughly the same moment, that their understanding of the situation was significantly incomplete. Vel looked down at his notes. He had prepared a full diplomatic summary of humanity's expected military offer. It was 3 pages long. He turned it face down on the table that he did not think he would be needing it. Ara called for a short recess after the naval section. She did not explain why. She simply pressed one of her dark, flat hands to the table and said, Pause, in a voice that left no room for discussion. The chamber lights shifted to a softer setting. Delegates broke into small clusters. The hum of nervous conversation filled the air in 12 different languages. Vel found Dara standing near the far wall, looking out at the stars through the station's viewport. Pale ring orbited a dying star, a red giant burning low and slow, its light the color of old coals. It made the station feel like the last warm place before darkness. They want to know why, Vel said. He had learned to be direct with humans. They appreciated it. Dara did not look away from the viewport. I know. Ara will ask when we resume. She will want to understand how a species builds an arsenal of this size and then simply keeps it. Stored, maintained, unused. He paused. Most species, if they had built what you have built, would have used it. Most species didn't build it the way we did, Dara said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she turned and walked back to the table. When the session resumed, Ara asked exactly as Vel had predicted. Direct. No softening around the edges. Explain to this council how humanity accumulated 2 centuries of weapons development and did not use it on the wider galaxy. Dara pulled up a secondary file. Not more inventory, but history. Human history. The kind that other species did not often request because it was long and complicated and frequently uncomfortable. We built it for ourselves, she said simply. The chamber was quiet. Every system in that document, every warhead, every rail battery, every drone class, it was all originally designed to be used by humans against humans. She let that sit. Earth had a long period, centuries actually, where different groups of our species competed. For land, for resources, for influence. We were very creative during that period. We had to be. The other side was always working on something new, so you had to work on something newer. She pulled up a simple timeline on the display. No weapons details, just dates and labels. Wars, Cold Wars, arms treaties, arms races after arms treaties. The cycle of it was visible even without explanation. The kinetic rail systems came out of conflict between 2 major powers that lasted most of a century. Neither side fired first because both sides knew what firing first would mean. So they just kept building. Dara traced the line with one finger. The antimatter work started the same way. A deterrent program. You build the terrible thing so the other side knows you have it, and then nobody uses it. Goss spoke carefully. And this worked, eventually. We had some very close calls. She did not expand on that. But yes, deterrence, negotiation, treaties. We stopped the internal conflicts. We kept the weapons. Partly because dismantling them is complicated. Partly because humans are honest about this. We can admit it. We didn't fully trust each other yet. And when you came to the stars? Ara asked. We came with all of it still in storage, Dara said. By then it was old technology to us. We had moved past it, culturally. We didn't want to use it. We just couldn't quite bring ourselves to throw it away. A Falori delegate near the back, one of the survivors from Sen, raised a thin hand. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Was it not frightening? To carry all of that? Dara looked at her for a moment. Yes, she said honestly. For a long time it was. Every generation grew up knowing it was there, knowing what it meant. That weight doesn't go away. You learn to live with it. You build your culture around the choice not to use it. And eventually that choice becomes the thing you're most proud of. Goss had been listening with his hands flat on the table. He lifted them now and pressed them together, a Draknari gesture that meant something close to deep thought. You said the weapons were built human against human, he said slowly. But then you said you also began a second program. After joining the Accord, after meeting other species. That's right. So you kept the old arsenal, and then you built more. We started fresh, yes, specifically for space, specifically for threats we hadn't seen before. She paused. We study conflict the way some species study art. When we saw how other empires fought, how the Draknari fight, we started designing around it. Not because we plan to start wars, because that's what humans do when they feel uncertain. We prepare. The chamber was very still again. Remy, Dara's young aide, had been sitting quietly at the edge of the human delegation's seats throughout. He was 26 years old. He had grown up on a colony world far from Earth, in a community that still built underground shelters as a cultural practice, even though nothing had threatened them in living memory. His mother had called it keeping the habit. He understood, more than most, what Dara was describing. Goss looked at him. You, the young one. You do not look afraid right now. Remy met his eyes. No. Why not? You're sitting in a room full of species that are very afraid, discussing a war that is moving toward your people. Remy thought about it for a second. It was a fair question. I guess, he said. I always knew we were ready. I just didn't know how ready until today. He glanced at the display, still holding the timeline of human history. All those centuries of building and holding and choosing not to press the trigger. Honestly, he added, neither did I. The second document loaded faster. That was the first thing Vel noticed. The first file, the legacy inventory, the 200-year accumulation of human against human weapons engineering, had taken over 3 minutes just to display its index. The second file loaded in seconds. It was shorter, much shorter, but shorter, Vel was beginning to learn, did not mean smaller. This program began 52 years ago, Dara said, standing at the display column again. Approximately 8 years after humanity formally joined the Galactic Accord. We spent those 8 years mostly listening, attending summits, reading reports, watching how interstellar conflict worked. She pulled up the document's cover page. It bore no dramatic title, just a number, a classification level, and a date. Then we went home and started designing. Ara leaned forward slightly. Designing what? Specifically, countermeasures, Dara said. Specifically tailored to every major military threat we had identified in a known galaxy, including threats from Accord member species, no offense intended. The room shifted. Someone made a sound that translated roughly as, I beg your pardon. We weren't planning to fight you, Dara said, without particular concern. We were planning not to lose if someone tried to fight us. There's a difference. She scrolled the document. The Draknari absorption method, for example. The way they take a world. No destruction, just overwhelming occupation. We modeled that 20 years ago. We built countermeasures for it. Those are in Section 4. She moved through the document with the calm efficiency of someone reading a grocery list. The second file was precise where the first had been broad. Every system in it had a specific purpose, a specific target profile, a specific set of conditions under which it would be deployed. Humanity had watched the galaxy for 50 years and taken very careful notes, and then given those notes to engineers. The Draknari section alone was 11 pages. We call this class a planetary siege breaker, Dara said, pausing on a particular entry. She opened the design schematics. The display filled with the outline of a ship, long, dense, built without any of the aesthetic consideration that most species put into their naval vessels. It was purely functional. It looked, Vel thought, like something designed by a species that had stopped caring what ships looked like and started caring exclusively about what they did. It is not designed to win a battle, Darth said. It is designed to make a planet impossible to hold. It disrupts occupation infrastructure, disables communication networks, degrades supply lines, and prevents any invading force from establishing the kind of long-term administrative control the Draknari rely on. She paused. Once a siege breaker enters a system, occupation becomes unsustainable within approximately 90 days. Goss had gone very still. How many, he asked, of that class? 9. Fully operational, crewed, and ready. Goss pressed his hands flat on the table again. He had defected from the Draknari Empire at significant personal risk, left behind rank, family, a comfortable position, because he believed the Accord was the right side to be on morally. He had not entirely been sure it was the right side strategically. He was becoming more confident. A hologram blinked to life at the edge of the display. Admiral Breck, joining from a shipyard in high orbit above Mars. He was a compact, gray-haired man with the look of someone who had not slept particularly well in about 30 years and had made peace with that. Behind him, visible through the shipyard's viewport, one of the siege breakers sat in dry dock. Even at distance, through a hologram, it was clearly enormous. Admiral, Doris said. Admiral, Breck replied. Council. He looked around the room briefly. We finished the 9th one 4 months ago. Ahead of schedule. The crews have been running drills. They're ready. Ara stared at the ship visible behind him. You built 9 of these and told no one. The Accord doesn't require disclosure of classified shipbuilding programs, Doris said. We checked. That is technically correct. Ara said, in the tone of someone who was composing a new rule in their head as they spoke. We also didn't think we'd need them, Breck added from the hologram, with the simple honesty of a man who had no patience for softening things. We hope we wouldn't. We built them anyway. Another delegate, from the Seshari, a species that moved fast and fought hard and had pledged 2 infantry divisions to the cause, made a low sound that translated as deep and genuine respect. Your species builds things it hopes never to need. It's a habit, Remy said from his seat, quietly. Dura turned to Goss. You said earlier you've seen the Draknari full fleet. You know their tactics, their command structure, their supply routes. Yes, Goss said. I'd like you to sit with our tactical team after this session. Compare what you know against what we have in sections 6 through 9. She gestured at the display. I suspect you'll find we've already accounted for most of it, but there may be recent changes. Goss looked at the display, then at Dara, then at the siege breaker visible behind Admiral Breck, sitting quiet and enormous in its dock. I defected to the right side, he said. He had said it before, in the hallway, to no one in particular. This time he said it like he meant it in a different way. Not relief. Conviction. Breck's hologram flickered slightly. We'll have the first 3 siege breakers positioned at the border within 11 days, he said. Faster if the Council can provide navigation rights through Turani space. The Turani delegate raised a hand immediately. Granted, he said. He did not ask for anything in return. That, Vel noted, was new. Species didn't normally grant navigation rights without negotiation. But then, the morning had been full of new things. Dara closed the second document. There's a third file, she said. Production capacity projections. How fast we can build more of everything I've shown you. She looked at the Council. Should I open it? Or would everyone like a longer recess first? The Mien had shifted color again. They were now a deep, settled blue, a color Vel knew from his training. It was the color Mien turned when they felt safe for the first time in a long while. He thought that was probably the right response. The negotiation room was smaller than the main chamber. It had no viewport, just walls, a table, soft light, and the faint hum of the station's air system doing its quiet work. Ara had requested the meeting privately. No full council, no observers. Just her, Dara, Vel as interpreter when needed, and 2 aides on each side who sat at the edges and took notes and tried not to look like they were holding their breath. Every species that has offered military support, Ara said, setting her broad hands flat on the table, has named a price. This is expected. This is how alliances function. Territory, resources, political weight. Name yours. Dara had a single sheet of paper in front of her. Actual paper. Humans still used it sometimes for things that mattered, a habit that other species found either charming or baffling, depending on their culture. She slid it across the table. Point 3 items. Handwritten. Ara read them. Then she read them again. Then she looked up at Dara with an expression that, even across the significant gap of alien biology, communicated something close to confusion. Medical database access, she said. Yes. Specifically, the Accords compiled records on diseases affecting carbon-based life in the outer spiral. We have 3 colony worlds dealing with an illness we haven't fully classified yet. Your database has 60,000 years of records. Ours has about 300. We've been asking for access for 9 years through standard channels. Ara looked at one of her aides. The aide made a small gesture that meant it was a reasonable request that had been stalled in bureaucracy. Ara's mandibles pressed together briefly. That can be arranged. Good. Dara pointed to the second line. Protected designation for 12 uninhabited systems. We want to terraform them. Long project. Some of them won't be livable for a century. We just want the Accord's formal guarantee that no one claims them while we work. Also reasonable. Ara said, with the tone of someone who had been expecting something unreasonable and was still waiting for it. And the third, a permanent seat on the Cultural Preservation Council. Ara was quiet for a moment. Not the Military Council. Not the Military Council. The Cultural Preservation Council oversees language archives, endangered species protection programs, historical site documentation, and the long-term continuity of pre-spaceflight civilizations. Ara said this carefully, as if confirming that both of them were speaking about the same body. It has no military authority, no political weight. It operates largely through research grants and low-budget expeditions. Yes, Dara said. That's the one we want. Vel, sitting to Dara's left, was watching Ara. He had learned to read the Vithian elders' expressions over years of council work. Right now, Ara looked like someone trying to solve a problem that kept producing unexpected answers. What? Ara asked finally. Dara leaned back slightly. Because we're good at war, counselor. We spent this entire session demonstrating how thoroughly we've prepared for it. That part of the deal is settled. We'll send the ships. We'll contribute the systems. We'll fight if it comes to fighting. She paused. But humanity would like to spend the next 50 years being known for something other than the size of our arsenal. The Cultural Council is something we can contribute to that doesn't involve any of what's in those documents. Ara looked at the paper again. Then she picked it up and folded it once, carefully, and placed it in front of her. Most species negotiate for maximum gain, she said. We have what we need, Dara said simply. 6 colonists, 12 empty worlds, and a seat at a table where people talk about saving things instead of destroying them. That's a good deal. There was a pause. I will be honest, Ara said. I expected humans to be difficult. We have our moments, Dara agreed. Far from Pale Ring Station, in a corner of space that had been quiet long enough that people had started to relax, Captain Sola Bright walked the length of her ship's main corridor and checked things. Not with a tablet. Not with a report. She walked, and she looked, and she listened to the sounds a ship made, the engine rhythm, the recycler hum, the particular note the pressure seals sang at this depth of space. She had learned to ship the way some people learn a person, by paying attention over a long time. Her crew moved around her with practiced ease. No one snapped to attention. No one performed alertness. They were simply ready, the way people become ready when they have drilled long enough that readiness stops being effort and becomes posture. She paused at a viewport near the forward section. Out there, past the dust and the dark, somewhere in the direction of the outer spiral, the Draknari were moving. Patient, methodical, absorbing world after world with the slow confidence of something that had never encountered real resistance. She wondered if they had any idea what was coming. Probably not. The briefing said they were good at information gathering, but their intelligence network focused on known threats. They categorized species, assigned threat levels, made decisions based on what had been true long enough to seem permanent. They had looked at humanity and seen a small, developing species with a modest presence and no history of interstellar conflict. They had assigned a low threat level and moved on. Sola thought about the documents Dara was presenting right now at Pale Ring. All those pages, all those systems, all that quiet, patient, completely invisible preparation. She almost felt sorry for the Draknari. Almost, her first officer appeared at her shoulder. Confirmation just came from the Admiral, he said. We're formally in. Sola nodded once. Pass the word. Crew's already heard. There, he paused, looking for the right word, calm. Good, she said. She turned from the viewport and started walking again, checking things. Calm is correct. 72 hours after the agreement was signed, the first supply lines were running. Not warships, not yet. Supply lines. Fuel depots repositioned. Medical transports rerouted. Communication relays extended into dark stretches of the outer spiral that had gone quiet since the Draknari advance began. Humanity did not start wars with fire. It started them with infrastructure. By the end of the first week, 3 Accord worlds that had been watching the horizon in quiet terror woke up to find orbital defense grids assembled above them. Not built, assembled. Prefabricated modules, launched from human cargo ships, clicking together in high orbit with mechanical patience. Automated systems ran diagnostics. Grids came online. The worlds below, when they were told what had appeared above them, responded in different ways. The Tyranni with formal gratitude, the Mun with a long pulse of bright, warm gold, one small Falori settlement with a message that simply said thank you in 12 languages, including 3 human ones they had apparently learned during the night. The Draknari moved on schedule. They were very good at moving on schedule. Their campaign was built on predictability, the kind that came from never having faced anything they couldn't absorb or outlast. They targeted a border system called Veth Minor, lightly defended, resource-rich, a clean addition to the Empire by every metric their planners had modeled. What their planners had not modeled was the response that IT came from 3 directions at once. Not a wall. Humans did not build walls in space, had decided long ago that static lines were a losing proposition, but a converging set of angles that turned the Draknari advance into a closing shape. Drone screens appeared first, small and fast and enormous in number, disrupting formation and burning communication links. Then the rail batteries arrived in mobile platforms, repositioning after every shot, impossible to target in return. Then, from a direction the Draknari fleet had believed was empty, 3 human warships came in low and fast and hit the supply chain so cleanly and so completely that the advance elements found themselves suddenly holding ground they could not hold without support. There were no Accord civilian casualties. The entire engagement lasted 11 hours. The Draknari pulled back. It was not a retreat. Not yet. Not officially, but they stopped moving forward, which was a thing that had not happened to them in 6 years of campaign. Their high command requested intelligence on what species had engaged them. The report took 2 days to compile because the analysts kept double-checking, certain there was an error. There was no error. The answer came back. Human Defense Fleet, Accord Allied Command. Engagement profile consistent with pre-modeled human military doctrine. The High Command reviewed the engagement data for a long time. The precision bothered them. The variety bothered them. The fact that the humans had apparently anticipated their formation approach, had built a response around it before the battle even started, bothered them most of all. They sent a message. Not to the Accord. Directly to Human Fleet Command. In translated English, because they had done their research at least that far, they asked if humanity was open to negotiation. Captain Sola received the message 40 minutes after arrived, forwarded through 3 layers of command. She read it twice. Then she forwarded it to Dara, who forwarded it to Ara, who called a brief session of the council and asked what humanity recommended. Dara said, "Tell them we will hear them out. But make sure they know that before they decide how serious they are about negotiating, they should request our full military inventory from the Accord's public registry." Ara looked at her. "The documents you presented at the summit are not in the public registry." "No," Dara agreed. but the cover page is the index. She paused. Let them see how long it is. Let them think about that before they sit down. The message was sent. There was no immediate reply from the Draknari on Pale Ring Station. The summit had not fully disbanded. Delegates lingered. Some were waiting for updates from the front. Some were deep in logistics meetings with human military liaisons who moved with the unhurried efficiency of people who had been planning this for a long time. Some were simply present in the way that people stay close to something important because leaving feels wrong. Vel sat alone in the main chamber. The lights were low. The display column was off. The room that had, days ago, held the weight of 47 frightened species now held only him and the sound of the station breathing around him. He had the document open on his personal tablet. The first file, the Legacy Inventory. He had been reading it in pieces between meetings whenever he had a few minutes. He had not finished it. Even now, even after everything, there were sections he had not reached that he scrolled forward. Category after category. He reached a section near the end of the document that he had not seen displayed in the chamber. The header read, Reserve Systems Classification Level. Do not distribute. He stared at it. Then he closed the tablet. He sat for a while in the quiet. Then he opened a message to his home world, to his family, to the people who had worried when he left for Pale Ring, who had watched the news feeds and understood enough to be afraid. He wrote, We are going to be fine. Humanity is thorough. He thought about that word for a moment. Thorough. It did not fully capture it. It was not the right word for a species that had spent 2 centuries building weapons it hoped never to use, then spent 50 more years building better ones just in case, then walked into a room full of frightened people and read the list out loud with the calm of someone who had always known what it said. But he could not think of a better word in any language he knew. So he sent the message and put the tablet away. The galaxy had asked for humanity's arsenal. Humanity had read the entire list. The Draknari were still thinking about it.